My name is Sash Kaziminidzad, and I appreciate everybody taking some time out of their day to join me for this advanced numbering with IdeateApps and ReNumber. So today we're going to be focusing on just one of the products within the IdeateApps, and of course that is ReNumber. Again, thank you everybody for your attendance today. Really appreciate you taking some time out of your day to be with us. All right, so a little bit about me. My name is Sash Kaziminidzad, as I mentioned before. I am the Customer Success Manager with Ideate Software. I'm based out of our Portland, Oregon office. My background is in architecture, and I got my master's from Montana State University, as well as my undergrad degree from there as well. I am a California licensed architect and have been with Ideate now for a little bit over 5 years. And again, my focus is on the Revit platform and also with Ideate software. With me today is my fantastic colleague, Richard Taylor. Richard is going to be fielding any questions that you may have for me during this presentation. And of course, I will pause from time to time and have a look at the question panel. So do me a favor. Definitely ask a lot of questions of Richard. We want to make sure we're keeping him very busy. So feel free to ask away. He is quite fantastic at using our Ideate software products as well. So he definitely has the great technical knowledge that is to help out. So Richard, thank you for joining me today as well. I really appreciate it.
My pleasure. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks, Sash.
All right, so what are the learning objectives for today? So we're going to just kind of do an overview of the ReNumber product, and of course that is found under the IdeateApps portion of the Ideate software menu within Revit. And so we're going to be focusing on the ReNumber product. We're also going to look at some of the default rules, and those are the ones that actually ship with ReNumber, and also how you can customize some of those rules and start thinking about making rules for your company. The reason why is we give you the flexibility to build renumbering rules that meet your needs. And that could be either your company's way of doing renumbering or even project-specific ways of renumbering. We're also going to show you a very creative use of ReNumber. And so, how do you renumber elements that are, say, nested? And so how do you get kind of the main elements to renumber? And then also how do you get the sub-elements to renumber as well? And then I'll just also give you some information on some tips and tricks. As I mentioned before, feel free to type in the question panel, and Richard will be fielding those questions, and I will pause from time to time to take a look at it as well. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about renumbering. So, who would be ideal for using this product? Well, really anybody tasked with element and view numbering. So if you're in charge of going through your project and setting up room numbering or door numbering, parking spaces, lighting, spaces, you name it, renumbering is definitely the product to be used for these tasks. Also, you're going to be renumbering really at various phases of the project. It just all depends on what that task looks like. And so it's not just kind of one of those do it once and you're over with it. You'll be using this product throughout the project life. And of course, as you know, the reason why we're doing this stuff is because unique numbering is definitely required to have effective communication. You just can't say room one or just room and room and room. We really have to be able to put out that information out there so that we can direct the end user to a specific portion on the drawings. And so we definitely need to make sure that our numbering is in order and makes sense to everybody that has to review the drawings. And as you know, especially for those that are working on large projects, renumbering rooms and doors, light fixtures, you name it, those kinds of elements can take quite a long time to accomplish. And so ReNumber makes really fast use of the renumbering tasks. And I think you'll enjoy some of the things I'm going to show you today, because you can use some of the out-of-the-box settings, or you can customize them and even make them more powerful to meet your needs. Okay, so before I dive right into the ReNumber program, I just kind of have this slide up here with some basic information kind of guiding you through the interface. And so I'm just going to kind of point out maybe a few big ones here to kind of keep an eye on them. One of them is the Manage Rules option over here. And this is a really great spot because you can actually manage the rules that are built into the project. You can, of course, create your own rules from here as well. But what's also really great is you can set up some default pathing to rules. And one of the things I always like to encourage people to do is to say, hey, if you have really particular renumbering tasks or you've built specific rules, you can put those somewhere on your server, and then you can path Ideate ReNumber to those rules. And what's great about that is then when you need to load up rules, it's easy to find them. If there are no rules that are exist in your project and you launch ReNumber for the first time, it'll pull in a set of rules by default. And so be thinking about that, especially for BIM managers out there that are really trying to make the Revit process a lot easier for the end users. Be thinking about how you can customize ReNumber and your rules and start pathing people so they can have access to those. The other thing I want to kind of point out, just this general area over here, we remind you of the rule that you've selected, and then what category are you targeting, and then what parameter will the data be pushed into. So again, we give you a nice, really simple summary over here. And then this area over here, your data editing options, it just depends on the rule that you use. And again, whether it's one of the out-of-the-box rules that we ship with the product or ones that you've created, for your particular workflow, we're going to give you those options over here. And what's really nice, I think, personally, about the interface is we did our best to really keep it as simple as possible, so you're not seeing a whole bunch of stuff on one screen here. We want to make sure we do a lot of the heavy lifting kind of in the background and keep it really simple up front for the end user. And then you'll see kind of an example here of what something could look like, or whatever your renumbering task is, what a sample of that renumbering might look like. And then there's a great feature over here, create a new path. And I'm going to get into that in a little bit. But if you want to renumber using a line, basically you say, I'm going to draw a line from point A to point B to point C, you can actually draw a path in your view, and then tell ReNumber to renumber along that path. And we have a couple of those options right here. And then depending on the rule that you use, we also have an auto number by view. And again, not all rules afford you this opportunity. It depends on the rule and the settings that you've created. But for some things, you can actually have it auto number by view. So that way you don't have to always use a path to do your renumbering. So doors is actually a good example where you can say auto number by view. This way you don't have to draw a path or manually pick each and every door for renumbering. That can take quite a bit of time. Okay, and then here's kind of the manage rules dialog box here, where you can see the rules that are actually in your Revit project. So that's kind of what we're pointing out over here, and a little bit of information on the rule that you select over here. So again, a little bit of a summary over here. And then you can create a brand new rule from scratch or duplicate one of our rules and then edit it from there if you want to. And if there are rules that you just don't want in a particular project, you can certainly delete those rules. You're not going to delete these off the server or anything like that. You're just going to remove it from the project. And then if you love your rules so much and you want to share it with the world, you can absolutely export those rules. And if you want to import it from a specific location, you can do that as well. So for example, maybe you built a rule that isn't necessarily good for the entire office, but maybe really, really important for your particular project. So maybe you'll export that rule into your project folder rather than somewhere on the server. Okay, so a couple other things I wanted to point out over here, and then of course we'll get into a demo here and show you the interface. I want to point out that manage menu that's in Ideate ReNumber. So once again, we have the option to manage rules, which basically is the same location as this button over here that you'll pick. But if you want to manage your options, this is what I was talking about earlier, where you can path to a rules folder. And so that'll take you to a default location on your C drive in your program files or wherever you designate the installation of IdeateApps. And in this case, we ship the product with a basic rules folder and a bonus rules folder. So that's where, for example, when you, let's say, start ReNumber for the first time in a project that hasn't used ReNumber, we'll pull those rules from this folder over here and automatically load them up in your project. And as I mentioned before, you can browse to a different location so that maybe they path to a special spot on your server. And then the other thing I wanted to point out while I was here is the line style. So if you decide to draw a path through, let's say, your rooms or through your parking spaces or whatever it may be, you can use one of your line styles that exists in your project, or you can use our default one, which is called Ideate Path, and it's a really heavy line style that's just kind of a red dash or whatever you may want it to be. And again, you can customize the look of it afterwards, but at least we're giving the option here to customize how you want that path to look. Okay. So I just want to kind of point that out for you as well. All right, so let's move on. Okay, so I'm just going to give you a brief overview of the interface here, just so for those of you that may not be as familiar with it. Again, we want to make sure that we are kind of just demoing it for you. So I'm going to go ahead and go to my Revit over here. And let's see, it should be shown up here on your screen. Let me just take a quick look to make sure it is, and it appears to be. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and launch the ReNumber program. So again, our software will mostly be found under the Ideate Software tab. If you are using older versions of our software, I believe it's 2016 and earlier. It's been so long now. But if you are using older versions, our software is found under the Add-ins tab. But for all the newer stuff, it's found under the Ideate Software tab. We've kind of broken up into two panels here. We have the Ideate Software, which has kind of our what I like to call our flagship products here, and then IdeateApps, which is a collection of 9 applications kind of bundled into one install. And so for today, we're only focusing on ReNumber. So I'm going to launch the ReNumber software here. Okay, so here's kind of the simplicity of the dialog box as you can see it on your screen. I'll just give you a brief interface overview. I won't touch on everything here. The rule that you're seeing show up over here, these ones over here, we're not going to list every single rule in the ReNumber interface at the beginning when you launch it. And the reason why is we're showing you rules that pertain to categories that kind of exist in the view. Okay, and so we're not going to show you things for parking spaces, just as an example, if there are no parking spaces in this view. The reason why is we don't want to clutter you with stuff that really doesn't pertain to what you're going to be doing. So we try to really keep it simple. And I'll just stick maybe on this rule here for the moment, the one called spaces. But, you know, here's where you kind of, based on this rule and how it's built, you know, here's how we're going to you know, allow you to start customizing the numbering and saying, I'm going to start my space numbering at space number 001. And this one's just going to increment to 002, 003, 004. So again, depending on the rule that you build, you may end up getting, you know, other options for how you want to, you know, do your numbering scheme. So this one here shows a prefix where this one does not. So depending on the customization of that rule, this interface will change. And then down here, we're giving you methods for how you want to do your renumbering. So do you want to just manually pick elements kind of one by one, or do you want to, you know, do a crossing path through there or a vertex type of path? And I'm going to talk more about this here in just a bit. And then once you select how you want to do things, that's when you hit start numbering. Before I proceed, though, a couple other things. I'll just show you the manage rules. So again, this dialog box you see here is essentially the same as picking on this ellipsis button over here. And this is, again, where you can create new rules, duplicate, you know, edit, delete, and of course you can import and export rules. So you can see this list over here is much larger than what you saw under here because this is kind of our general rules that are in this particular Revit project. And if I come in over here and go to Manage Options, this is where you can path to a different location if you want to. So by default, we'll path ReNumber to the Basic Rules folder, but feel free to change the pathing if you feel like you need to. And then again, you can change the line style over here, and you can select from a list of line styles that are in your project. All right, so that's just the basics of the interface. I'm going to get back into the interface here real briefly and show you a lot more, but I just wanted to show you we really kept this simple so that at the end user at the end of the day can really just understand how easy it is to use it. So I'm going to close this here, and I'll just come back to PowerPoint and just show you a few more things. Okay, so as I like to tell people about ReNumber, it's all about the rules. So, again, we ship ReNumber with some basic rules in there, but feel free to customize them, tweak them, do what you need to do to meet your needs. That's the reason why we made this program. We want to give you as much flexibility as possible. So you can change things like the target parameter. So as an example, let's just use rooms as the example. Typically, when we're thinking about renumbering, we are pushing a value for the room number in the number parameter. Or if it's a door, or let's say a light fixture, we may be pushing that information into the mark parameter. But you're not just limited in ReNumber to pushing the data into those kind of typical parameters that a lot of us use. You can literally push this data into any sort of instance-based parameter, including custom parameters. So if you're making custom project parameters or shared parameters, you can push the data into there as well. So that's pretty fantastic. Again, we're giving you as much flexibility as possible. You can also ignore certain types of elements. I'm going to show you this in a demo. It's really exciting, the fact that we can actually ignore certain elements. So if I drew a path through elements of the same category, I could say, I want to ignore some of these, and I'm going to show you how that's done. And you can combine parameters. And what we're really saying about that is we can take data. You can kind of see in an image over here. We're kind of taking data and we're concatenating it together in a sense to basically make it read as one string. So I can take various fields. I can say grab the room information, grab the level information, and put those two together and stuff it with a increment value into the room number. So my room number may say something like level 1 and then room 101, all in there for the room number. So we can do those kinds of things. And you can also control when the numbering sequence should actually restart. So in a lot of cases, you can say, I want to renumber my spaces or my space numbers on a per space basis, or my light fixtures, I should say, on a per space basis. You can do all that kind of stuff. It's really cool. So I'm going to get into this here. Okay, so what I'm going to do here is I'm going to give you a few demonstrations over here. So I'm sure you're going to have some questions during this process, so definitely ask Richard. That's why he's here today, to help out. So definitely hit him up with some good questions here. We're really excited to see what you guys come up with. So I'm going to come back to Revit here, and I'm going to use an electrical file just as an example. And I want to point out that what I'm going to show you here from like the electrical standpoint really pertains to other disciplines like structural, mechanical, plumbing, architectural. So even though I'm just showing you some electrical workflows, be thinking about how these could work in your workflows. Okay, so I'm going to start with this view that I've created over here. I'm just going to kind of zoom in over to this area and just show you some of my space numbers here. And what I want to point out to you is I have an architectural link in here that's actually showing you the rooms and room tags from that link. And we could see that the spaces in here, if I click on one, you can see it over here, clearly have a discrepancy from the architectural link. Okay, and so one of my goals maybe at the end of the day is to match up my space numbers with the architect's room numbers. Okay, so the purple that you see over here that's kind of half-toned is from the link. All right, but before I do that, I just want to show you a few things. So I'm going to go to ReNumber. Again, it's under the Ideate Software tab. And I'm going to start with one of our out-of-the-box rules. And you can see it has a little star next to it. By the way, if you want to move like special rules or rules that you want kind of up to the top, you can certainly put a character like that in front of there and it will move the rule to the top. That way you can access it really quickly. Totally up to you. Okay. All right, so I'll just kind of start with this one here. And so, again, the category that we're targeting here are the spaces, and we're going to be targeting the number parameter, meaning the number-based parameters inside of spaces. If this was doors, it would be maybe the mark parameter, okay? And in this case, I can either pick them manually, just one by one, or if I drew a path through them, I can then use that path and decide how I want to renumber along that path. And I'm going to show you a couple of examples here. I'm going to set my start increment to space 1000. You can see here this one starts at 1000. That's kind of a big number. Most would probably start at 100, but you get the idea. Okay, and what I'm just going to do is I'm just going to start with select elements, and I'm just going to hit start numbering. And just like that, I could pick one of these manually, and watch, I can even pick like this one manually, and there's really no relationship here to the rooms. I'm just literally incrementing them kind of one by one. Okay, and again, that's maybe great for simple tasks, but clearly we have a lot of spaces that we want to renumber. So this may not be the most efficient method of doing so. But I just want to point out we can easily do that. Okay, so again, small tasks. What I'm going to do here, though, before I proceed, is I'm going to come over to the manage rules here, and I'm just going to have a look at this particular rule. So this is the one that's selected over here, and I'm just going to show you what it looks like. So this rule we built, it comes again with the program, but you can see here we have the name of the rule, what category that we're going to be targeting, and the fact that we're just going to be incrementing it. And these are kind of the fields that you can add in here. So when I double click on this, we're basically just going to say we're going to increment starting at 1,000. Okay, and when I look at this here, this NUM is a name that I can give it. So whatever it may be, I'm just saying that this is called a number, and it's going to increment and starting with 1,000. That's all that means. And I'll come back to the increment per in just a bit. Okay, so that's like the really crude basic rule. You'll see that for things like rooms as well. All right, I'm going to close kind of this down. Now, I do want to talk about paths here real quickly. I am going to create a new path because maybe I want to make this a little more efficient and do my numbering along the path. Now, what I want to point out is if you look at this graphic, I think this graphic really does a good job of explaining how things work when you use a path. But if I have a crossing path versus a vertex, if a line crosses through a space, even if it nicks the corner of a space, it will number in that order. Doesn't matter. Even if it just barely runs through, like if I ran through barely the corner of the space over here, it would number it in that order. But if I want to skip over spaces and kind of bebop around, whatever term you want to use, bebop just came to my mind, you can certainly use a vertex method, which I prefer because it gives me a lot more flexibility. Okay, so I'm going to say create new path, and I'm going to do this renumbering then via a vertex. So as I draw my path, I want to be thinking about vertices here. So I'm going to select number, and I'm just going to go, 1, 2, maybe I'll go to, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, whatever it may be. Okay, and I'm going to hit escape here, and the line will appear a little bit more obvious. But what I want to point out is I was thinking about the vertices as I was doing my numbering, and when I do this, I get my summary window over here. What it's basically showing me are the new values, and you can see this first one didn't change because I actually started it at 1,000, so there was no change. But then I'm basically saying I want this to be 1,001, 1,002, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7. Okay, and that's what's going to be, and 8, excuse me. And so that's what's going to be confirmed over here. And if I hit accept changes and close this out for a moment, that was pretty awesome, right? And so it's just numbering it in that order. All right, so again, that's kind of what the path method does. One of the things I recommend you do is, I guess you could approach this in a couple of different ways. I like to create like duplicate views, like working views that may have this path in here, so that these are not my sheet views. And so you can go back to your working view, and if you need to change your numbering schema or add a line to this, you can easily do that by going to your working view and adding to this line and then running the renumber program again. Just wanted to kind of point that out. Okay, so again, a little bit faster, but maybe since the architect did all the hard work, I want to kind of reap the benefits of their hard work. So I'm going to come back to renumber, and I'm going to switch over to a rule that actually we ship with the program, which is the space number from room. And I want you to pay attention to here when I select it. Ooh, that's beautiful. It gives me the auto number by view, and this time it doesn't give me the numbering start point because it's going to look at the room number from the link and apply that to the space. We do give you, however, a prefix, meaning if you wanted to prefix the number, maybe you wanted to put SP, so it says SP-1000, SP-1001, 1002, you can do that. What I do want to show you, though, real quickly is the rule. And I'm going to go to edit it. And this one here, we are adding a constant in here. If I double click it, we're just saying it's blank by default to start with. We're prompting you for that value, and that's the name. And I'll explain this here in a moment. And then this number thing here is we're pulling the room number data from the linked file. And again, we can pull all sorts of other bits of information if we wanted to and push that into the room number. It's totally up to you. Like people is not a built-in Revit parameter. Somebody added that as maybe a project parameter, shared parameter. And so you could push that number in theory into the space if you wanted to. That would be a little odd, but you can certainly do that. All right, so basically we're giving you the optional prefix as your constant. By default, we're leaving it blank, but we're prompting you for it. So what does that all mean at the end of the day? Let me show you. There's your optional prefix. There's your prompt. Okay, so now watch this. This is just going to be totally make you happy here. I'm going to hit start numbering. Look how fast ReNumber just does this. It's showing you an example. Everything in white means it already was that number. But you can see just like this, 116 values are what we scanned. 98 of them are going to change. And again, the other cool thing too is you can actually ignore certain ones. So if there were spaces that you didn't want to number, you could come in here and say, you know what, I want to ignore that one. You're free to do that if you want to. I'm going to accept the changes. All right, I'm going to let ReNumber do its thing here, and just like that, have a look at this over here, and you see 1010, 1010, 1013, 1014, and so forth. And just like that, we match the architect's numbering scheme. Now, if you look over here, just as an example, you know, this space over here seems very different, and probably the reason why was and it depends on the space you do. Did the actual space meet up to the height where it can be read? In this case, that's not the case because the architect just didn't number these rooms properly. So you can see that's how we came up with that. But we matched those numbering schemes nonetheless. All right. So that was just, you know, a really quick example of how we used one of our built-in rules to say, hey, we want to grab the architect's room numbers and push that data right into space numbers by using a link. I don't have to manually come in here one by one. I don't have to draw a path through all this model here. I made a pretty simple use of that. So that's pretty great. Okay, so now let's take this and look at how we can now take the space information and maybe push it into the lighting information. So I'm going to come over here to my lighting over here, and I have some examples of paths over here. And by the way, let me just show you what the path really is. It's just a detail line. That's all it is. We're just doing it for you in the program. You can actually draw these detail lines if you want to without using the program. I could literally just come in here and go to annotate. I can come to detail line, and I can pick my Ideate path if I want to right there, and I can start drawing my own path without using the program. You're free to do whatever you want to do in this case. So don't use model lines. You will not be happy because those model lines will show up in all your views since they are model-based elements. Plus, ReNumber won't let you select them. Okay, so let's look at lighting here. I do not have the space tags showing just because I don't want them to conflict with the light fixture tags, but you can see here the spaces are numbered. You know, you can see it right over here. So I just want to point that out, that the spaces are absolutely numbered. All right, but I'm interested in light fixture tags, and clearly we see that the light fixture numbers do not reflect the space number. And I'm thinking that I want to be able to direct the contractor to what space it is, and so they know where these light fixtures go. Okay, so I have a couple of paths here. This one here is kind of intended to be a vertex method, and this one's kind of intended to just be a crossing method. So I'm going to just show you both of them over here. So I'm going to come over to Ideate Software and go to ReNumber. And again, I have spaces because spaces exist in this view, but I also have lighting. In the last view that I was in, lighting was not optional there because light fixtures were not shown in the last view that I was in, but now they are available. So I'm going to use our kind of out-of-the-box lighting. Okay, and this one here just says, hey, we're going to target the mark parameter, okay, and we're just going to increment it A, B, C, D, and so forth. Okay, now what I do want to do here real quickly is I just want to show you how this rule is built. Okay, when I select this and I go to edit, here's how this one is working. This one's going to read your space number, and then it's going to do increment. So in this case, we're saying -A, -B, -C, and so forth. Let's take a look at the increment. All right, because I want to point out how this particular rule was designed. Again, you can customize this to meet your needs. We gave it a name. NUM just tells you where it fits in the order of the concatenating data. We're going to start at -A. If you want to start at -1, you can do that, and then it'll become -2, -3, -4. And then I want to point out this increment per space. And what this means over here is, as I go through each space, it's going to increment them on a per space basis. If I remove that and say none, then the schema over here will basically continue on as I go through each space. And I'm going to give you a demo of that in a moment. But basically, the ABCD will restart at each space. And then if I only have one light fixture per a space, what that means is it won't use the -A, it'll just omit it. So basically, light fixture number will match the space number. But if there are more than one light fixture in there, then they'll get an A, B, C. So I'm going to demo this for you here in a moment. Okay, so let's just go ahead and do that. All right, and so what I'm going to do here is I'm going to, since I already have a couple paths here, I'm just going to show you the vertex method maybe to start with. So let's just go ahead and do that. And I'm going to hit start numbering, and I'll pick maybe this first one over here. And you could see 844 will become 1060A. So we're going A, B, C, and D. Pretty easy, okay? And again, this is going to increment per space. That's basically what this means over here, all right? So I just wanted to kind of point that out. If you wanted to draw a path through things to kind of change the numbering order, you can certainly do that. Okay, I'm going to come back to here, and this time what I'm going to do is use the crossing method and just pick this light fixture over here, or this line over here, and start numbering. Okay, and we're going to go 1007, 8, 9, 10, 11, basically in the order of the spaces. And if I hit accept changes over here, actually I'm not going to hit accept changes yet. I just want to show you, because this was space 1007, 8, 9, and 10. Since there's only one fixture in each one, it drops off the A or B at the end of it, because we said leave singles blank. Okay, now what I'm going to do here is I'm going to hit cancel for a moment, and I'm going to come back to the rule over here. Okay, and then what I want to do is I want to edit the rule, and I want to look at this increment, because I want to help you kind of understand it more if you haven't looked at it. I'm going to double click to edit it. Okay, what I'm going to do here is I'm going to say increment per space, or from increment per space to none, and then I'm going to uncheck leave singles blank. So the incrementing of the light fixtures won't be on a per space basis now. That's basically what we're getting at. And even if there's one fixture in there, we're going to put a letter after it. I'm going to hit OK. And then I'm just going to give this maybe a new name. And I'll just say, we're going to say lighting, no increment. No increment per space. Whatever we want it to be. So I'm going to hit save and close. So I'm customizing this rule and not obliterating my original one. Okay, so there it is. I'm going to hit OK. Now let's look what happens when I pick this method again. Now it becomes different. So take a look. It's still adopting the space number, okay, but it's not incrementing the A, B, C, D on a per space basis. It's just incrementing them as we go along. That's what we're basically seeing over here. And when we said, when we uncheck don't leave singles blank, we're going to get the A, B, C, D, E, and so forth. So as we go along here, it'll still use a space number, okay, because that's what we told the rule to use, but we're not incrementing these on a per space basis. We're basically just incrementing these values as we go along. I'm going to hit cancel one more time. I'm going to come back up over here. I'm going to go to edit. And let's just go ahead and let's see here. I think what I want to do is I'm going to say, just trying to think of maybe how I want to do this. I'm going to say back to space. So we're going to increment it per space again, but we're not going to leave singles blank. Okay, so again, we're going to increment the values on a per space basis. So look at how this changes now. A. And the reason why is we're going to increment them on a per space basis, but they restart this numbering at each space because of the increment per. because we left leave singles blank unchecked, each one of them will get at least an A. So that means if I put a light fixture inside of this room right here, this space, this one may be end up being 1008A, and this will be 1008B, and that will take care of that. So again, that's a pretty nice way of doing that. So again, you have a lot of options at your disposal. I'll just hit accept changes just to show you what happens over here. Okay. All right, but let's go a little more advanced. I want to take this maybe up to another level because I like doing that. There's no such thing as really simple with Sash. I always have to kind of kick these things up an extra notch. What I want to do is I want to add a little bit of flair, a little bit of customization. I may have a lighting rule that says, hey, you know what? In addition to the space, I want you to maybe tell me what level this light fixture's on, but I want that level information as part of the space number. Okay, so let's just go ahead and show you what that's going to look like. All right, so I'm going to launch ReNumber again. Okay, and I have a rule that I already built and saved in this file. And by the way, I had exported it as well in case I want to use it on another project. I put the word custom in here. We don't do that. If you make your own rule, it doesn't automatically append that name. I just put that in there to remind me it's custom. Now, what's interesting is this one still targets the mark parameter. It gives you an increment that you want to start with, but there's some more examples of what this thing is capable of doing. Okay, now I want to just go ahead and show you what I'm talking about. I'm going to go over here, and I'm going to go to edits because I want to look at this rule for a moment. Now, this one may look a little more complicated, but it's pretty awesome. The first thing here is I added a field, and the field is from the level and a value called level prefix. And I'm going to show you what I did here to accomplish this in a moment. But basically, this is the name that I type in, LVL prefix. That's what shows up here. And then I grabbed a parameter called level prefix. This is a custom parameter that I made, and I assigned it to the level categories. And I'll explain to you why I did it this way. There are other ways of doing this, by the way. I just wanted to throw this one out there as an example. Okay, so that's that. Then I have a constant in here. But now this constant is just a dash. Okay, so it's going to be level prefix dash, the space number, and then the A, B, C, D, and so forth. But I told my staff, as an example, that I do not want you to deviate from the numbering standards, meaning you are only allowed to use dashes in here. You can't do double dash. You can't put a space in there. So it can't be level prefix space number. It has to have a dash in there. And by forcing that, I unchecked prompt for value. Okay, if you prompt for value, then the users can change that dash to something else over here. I decided not to give people that flexibility, so I'm hard coding that as part of the rule. Then we're going to grab the space number. You're pretty used to that by now. And then we're going to do an increment, and I decided not to put a dash A in here. I could certainly do that, but if you want it to be dash A or dash 1, 2, 3, 4, you're more than welcome to do that. You can even do lowercase a. It's totally up to you on what you want to do, but then they'll start incrementing from there. We're going to increment this per space, and regardless if there's only one light fixture in a space, it will still put an A on it instead of just adopting the space number. All right, so with that said, this is my custom rule. Everything's going to be pushed into the mark parameter. I'll go ahead and close this here real quick, and look at that. I can auto number by view. So let's just go ahead and just show you what that looks like. I'll hit start numbering. Just like that, I'm getting a nice summary. Okay, everything's 0, 1, and I'll explain why it's 0, 1. And then instead of it saying dash A, it's just A because I took the dash out of that number value. I'm going to hit accept changes and let it think for a moment. And just like that, take a look at this. Just like that, I numbered all of these things. It's pretty impressive, right? And again, 1013, if I click on the space, this is the space number right here. So now you're probably wondering, what is the level prefix? Again, this is a custom parameter that I created. I have a schedule over here called level schedule. And all I did is I have level 1s through 8. I know it's a really simple example of it, but I just came in here and I just added a custom project parameter right here that is a text-based parameter that will show up for levels. And when I made the level schedule and added this level prefix here, I just said, well, instead of me saying level 1-1013A, I wanted to say 01 to represent level 1. Not a bad idea. You can do that. And we actually have some of this information on our website that kind of explains some of this workflow. But again, these are just ideas. Be thinking about how you want to customize your Revit templates in your projects to maybe make this easy. So if this was on the second level and these light fixtures recognize that, it would automatically put 02 in there for you. Pretty cool stuff. All right, I'm going to save this over here. And I'm going to close it. Hey, Richard, I'm going to go ahead while I close this file, maybe have you jump on. And are there any questions that maybe we can read aloud to people?
Hi, Sash. There hasn't been really a lot of questions, although Adam did mention one that he asked a question whether we're renumbering MEP fab parts.
Yeah.
And right now we're not. Just for those of you that are familiar with the MEP fabrication parts, it's kind of a different animal, so to speak, within Revit. They don't kind of adhere to the basic family rules of a normal family. So that is it's a great question, and it is something we're reviewing for potentially some future release. But right now we're not handling the MEP fab parts.
Okay, yeah, thanks for pointing that out, Richard. Yeah, so as you've probably noticed going through Revit, yeah, the fab stuff is very different. Even some of the structural stuff with like the structural connectors and all that, the way those items work, the libraries are they're very different. The data that gets put inside of those are different. So, but those are always things we continue to look at, and we have to go in and really dissect some of this stuff to make sure we're targeting the right information. So, thank you for that question, and Richard, thank you for reading that aloud. Folks, definitely ask Richard lots of questions here. We want to make sure we get those questions answered for you. Okay, so what I'm going to kind of move to another example over here. I'm going to use curtain panels. And again, we're using curtain wall panels here because we want to show you, yes, you can do curtain wall panels, but what if I drew a path through an element that is also curtain wall panel, but I want ReNumber to not recognize that as an element for renumbering? It's pretty interesting. And so we've thought about that stuff and we've given people options. And so I want to review that. So again, what I've done here is I drew a path. And as a matter of fact, I didn't use ReNumber to draw the path. I literally just went to annotate, detail line, found Ideate path, and drew the detail line through there. And I just want to kind of point a few things out. You'll see here that I have the curtain panel. Okay, and then I also have some spandrel panels in here. And I just decided for this exercise to not renumber the spandrels. Okay, well, let me just show you what happens if I just kind of use a normal out-of-the-box rule. So I'm going to come over to Ideate software and I'm going to go to ReNumber. Okay. Okay, and when I go to ReNumber, again, we're only showing you the elements, the categories of elements that are visible in this view. So notice there's nothing about spaces in here like you saw in the last file, or lighting fixtures. These elements are not visible or they're turned off in this view. So you can see here we're just showing you a few things. Now I have my custom rule here. Of course, I had to do that, but I noticed that there's no other curtain panel rules in here, and we actually have one that comes with the product. To do that, what I'm going to do here is I'm going to go to the Access More Rules. Okay, and what I'm going to do here is I'm going to import a rule. And again, depending on how you pathed your product, mine by default paths to the basic rules. Okay, I'm going to go to ReNumber, and we actually have a bonus rules. And when I go there, there is a curtain panels.rule. Okay, so again, if you make custom rules, save those and export them out. You can bring them into other projects. Okay, and so curtain panels shows up right there. I'll hit OK, and there it is. Now this one here says, ooh, orientation W dash, meaning, you know, what direction is this panel facing, and then it's an incrementer. All right, fantastic. So we've made this pretty simple. Now this panel happens to be on the south side, And I'm just going to go a little custom here. I'm going to say S dot. Why not? I can do that. And so there's S.001. There is no auto number by rule or by view because this particular rule doesn't meet that criteria. And I'm going to use crossing. And the reason why is you can see here this goes over, up, and crosses through here. And let me just go ahead and hit start numbering. And let me just show you what goes on here. I'm going to pick the first line of the path. That's all I need to pick. Okay, because it recognizes that it's a connected line and mathematically knows how to search for all lines. I'm going to hit accept changes, and notice here that they numbered the spandrel panels as well. Maybe a slight bummer. Okay, what I don't want to do is go back and try to delete these numbers or change them all to nothing. That's a lot of work. Okay, so again, I just wanted to kind of point that out. All right, so I'm going to close this down. I'm going to hit the undo button. Again, the reason why it renumbered is because it came up over here and connected, okay? Okay, so what I'm going to do here is I'm going to undo this. All right, so there it is. It's all undone, okay? Now let's look at my custom rule over here, okay? This is exciting. I'm going to come over here. I'm going to go to curtain panels based on a level prefix. Yep, I added a level prefix, okay? And this one, I made this rule so I don't have to put a dash in here or anything like that. I just basically type in what the letter is for the orientation. And notice over here it says 02. That would be an example of level 2 south curtain panel number 1. But let me just start numbering here real quick and just show you what goes on. When I do this, I see several panels over here that are ignored this time. And that's because I built into this rule to ignore the spandrel panels. Well, what does that mean? Let me show you. Be thinking about this as well. I'm going to come to this ellipsis button over here, and I'm going to go to Edit. And what I did over here is I said ignore a parameter, which is in this case is a type-based parameter that I called spandrel panel. Okay, I'm going to show you how I did that in a moment. But basically, I'm saying grab the level prefix, which is the same thing I did in the last example where I added a prefix to the level number. I'm giving you a constant of a dash, forcing you to use a dash because I didn't prompt the user. I'll change it though, why not? Okay. And then over here, my orientation, prompt you to type in what letter it's facing. Another dash, I'll prompt you again. And then increment 1, 2, 3, 4. And I'm saying increment these panels on a per level basis. That's what this means. So let's look at what that does. When I hit OK, now I have more options. You see that right there? So I can say, oh, okay, it's going to get the level prefix. Maybe I'll put a dot after it. So you see it's level 2 dot S. And then I could use -001, hit start numbering. When I do that and hit accept changes, now notice over here it omitted the spandrel panel. Okay, and I'm going to explain to you how that works. You can see it starts over here. You see this says 03 and 04. Let me explain why. First and foremost, I'm going to tab select over the spandrel panel, and I'm going to go to edit type. And I made a type parameter called spandrel panel, and I put a checkbox in it. That's all I did. I literally just hit make new parameter, applied it to the curtain walls, and said this is a spandrel panel, or to the curtain panels. If I select on this one, you should see the spandrel panel show up over here, but it's not checked because I didn't want to check it because this is not a spandrel panel. So what does that mean? When I come to renumber now, again, be thinking of these things. When I come to renumber, what this means over here is that I'm going to ignore any panel or any curtain panel that has this parameter checked. And I did that by just selecting one of these spandrels and putting a checkbox. And because it was a type parameter, it applied that value to all spandrels. Just like that. And then over here, when I use the increment, it's incrementing it on a per level basis. So it recognizes that this curtain wall is on level 3 and this curtain wall is on level 4. So it incremented the numbers on a per level basis. That's why it just restarted the numbering schema. Okay. And then the letter S over here, I just manually inputted that and I said start it over here. And just like that, I was able to just do that curtain panel and I can still have this run right through it. So I could, in theory, just come over here and add to this line and I could just start dragging this thing up. So for example, if I come in over here and create similar and come up over here and, oh, what the heck, let me come over here through the spandrel panels like I was doing before. See this? I'm just coming through like so, and I'll even run it through the spandrel panel over here again. And how great this is. I'm going to hit escape to finish this renumbering, and then I'm just going to come over to renumber, and I'm just going to come back over here and say this is all great. I'm going to select a crossing window again, pick the first line once again, and then I'm going to hit accept changes, and they all renumber just like that. All right, so pretty easy thing to do. By adding more lines to this, I can easily renumber all of these panels. So look how easy it is, and it skips right over the spandrels. Okay, so that's a little bit of that. All right, I'm going to come back to the PowerPoint now and show you some more stuff. And I'm going to check here real quick if we have any more questions here. I don't see any. All right, Richard, feel free to weigh in anytime if you want to. Okay. Go ahead, Richard.
Yeah, just real quickly while you switch, I think there was a question that was asked about, does this work on a single parameter? So I had kind of a couple answers to that. That, you showed that you could pull a parameter from the category, like in the case of your light fixtures, right?
Right.
But you could, for instance, have circuit number and level and wattage, and I'm trying to think of other things,
sure.
lumen value. Like there could be any number that you could string these together to concatenate them to create a rule. So that's the first answer. The second answer, which I thought might be good for people, is that right now the rules are working on a single category. So we're choosing a category of light fixtures, we're choosing a category of doors as an example, or walls, but we are working on an improvement where we're going to be able to create multi-category rules. So I wasn't exactly sure. The question was asked about could we have multiple parameters, so I thought I'd give both of those answers. So we are planning an improvement where we will be having rules for multi-categories. So you could do, as an example, let's say ducts and duct fixtures with the same rule. You wouldn't have to have two rules to renumber that. So hopefully that explains a little bit from the question that was asked by Nathan.
Yeah, and maybe to tag on to the, can you do more parameters or more basically have a longer string. And Richard was kind of talking about you could do like lumens and wattage. And all of that. And basically what we're talking about is you can add multiple fields. And when you add multiple fields, you just give it a name, whatever that field may be, whatever that name is, and then you can pick whatever parameter, and it will grab that data, and it will add that information. So let's just say family is, this one, right? And so if I came in over here and added that, it would also then append the family name to that numbering schema for the mark value of the curtain panels. So we're giving you a lot of options. We don't give you just one field. That would be kind of a bummer. You can add as many fields as you want. Of course, your numbering will be out of control at that point, but we give you that flexibility.
And also, since you're in that dialogue, just real quickly, I don't know if you mentioned it, but the target parameter, like most of the time it is mark, but it's any text-based parameter. So if you've got, for instance, if you created a custom shared text-based parameter, you could certainly use that to populate by these renumbering rules. So just so you know, that's what we're doing when we're giving you that list of text or of target parameters. It's looking at all both system and shared parameters that are text-based.
And family as well.
Yes, thank you.
And family, yeah. So if you make any custom parameters, as long as they're text-based, and the reason why we don't give you like number-based parameters is I could probably guarantee, I mean, this would completely nullify that that number-based parameter, right? If it's an integer, none of this values are integers. So that's why text-based parameters makes absolute sense. So, and thankfully, things like rooms and doors, those are actually text-based parameters. So thank you, Richard. Okay, so I'm going to come back here. I got a few more things I want to cover. I want to show you about nested families, and I'm going to use Pilecaps and their corresponding piles. So you've probably seen this before, but these are actually nested families. And the other one that comes to mind when I think about it is like the dining table with chairs. It's kind of the same thing. So what I want to do here is I want to be able to number my pile and then my corresponding pile caps with like an A, B, C, D. And I'm going to kind of go through this one a little quickly. We actually have a video and blog post on our website that talks and goes through this whole process as well. So one idea maybe to get your piles to kind of auto number would be to use spaces. Since you're on the structural side of things, structural folks don't use spaces. You know, most of the MEP folks do. So we can put spaces in there, and if the piles are inside of a space, we'll be able to recognize it and help you number your piles. So be thinking about that. The space numbers will then be used as part of the pile cap and pile numbering. And then you can use the auto number by view for this method to automatically number the piles and the pile caps, basically that whole nested family. Let me just kind of explain to you a little bit about what's going on. We made a couple of rules here. So we're using a parent setting, and then we're targeting the entire family. So I'm going to talk about both. But basically what we're saying here is we made a custom parameter called parent mark. And this one lives in the family itself, the pile family, and in the project. And then we're going to use a ignore nested. And this is actually a custom made, I don't know how to explain it. We've recognized what families are nested, and we can actually get that information. And if any of you are using, let's say, Ideate BIMlink or Ideate Explorer, the query function in Explorer can organize information by nested family. So we know what families are nested, and so this is not a parameter that you normally see in Revit, but we added it to ReNumber so that ReNumber recognizes that. So basically what we're trying to do is we want to basically number the parent family, but we don't want to push any of that data yet into the subfamily or the child object, which would be the piles. We're going to use the space number, okay, as we've done before, and we're going to increment it 1, 2, 3, 4. And then we're going to increment the naming, or the numbering, I should say in this case, on a per space basis, so that we're not getting piles 1 through 100. It may be piles, 100-010203. For one space, and then 101-010203, and so forth. Okay, you'll see this in action. Okay, and then what we've done in the pile cap family is we've come in here and we associated the parameter called parent mark that's inside the pile, because this pile is nested in the pile cap family. We tied this parameter into the parent mark parameter, which is part of the pile family. So this is the pile family. We're just basically associating these parameters like so forth. Okay, then after we do that, we're going to actually set the mark for the pile itself. And so what we're going to do is we're going to ultimately target the mark parameter. Again, this is a text-based parameter, as Richard was kind of alluding to earlier. So it happens to be a system parameter, and this one's tied to the nested pile family. Okay, what we're going to do down here is we're going to get the parent mark value, which you had set earlier. Okay, and then what we're going to do is we're going to get the pile number. And what we did in the pile family is we put an A, B, C, D in there. And what that's going to do is it's going to basically get the parent mark value, tie it with the A, B, C, D, basically concatenate it together, and then it'll push that data then into the mark value for the nested pile. And what I'm going to do here is I'm going to just demo this for you. And again, if you have more questions, definitely check out the website, because we have this as a blog post, but I want to show you how neat this is. Okay, you could be thinking about these fantastic workflows. All right, I know I have maybe a couple of minutes left. I'm probably going to go just a few minutes over, but hang in there with me here. I think this is pretty great. Let me just actually edit one of these families just to show you what it looks like. This is another family, so it's just nested in here. And what we did is we just went in here and we added a pile number parameter, and we basically gave each one of these an A, B, C, D. That's all we did, okay? And then we also then did the parent mark, and we tied that into a project parameter or a shared parameter that we actually created in this family file itself. Okay, so there it is. And there's no data in here right now, but we're basically going to push the data in this whole family and then also into each one of the subpiles. Okay, and so that's kind of the way this is going to work. So the first thing I'm going to do here is I'm just going to go to ReNumber. And I'll make a quick use of this. I'm going to just renumber my spaces starting at, I'll just do 1,000 again. I'm just really liking that number. And I'm just going to pick each space just manually, okay? And so there you have it. So I have new space numbers. And you can see here that these piles don't change. Now what I'm going to do in ReNumber is I'm going to come in over here, and now I'm going to say I'm going to set the parent, okay? And you can see here that it's going to be an increment, and it's going to go 1001-01 and so forth, okay, just as an example. And I'm going to auto number by view and watch what happens. Okay. When I do that, what we're basically doing is we're pushing that value into a parameter called parent mark. We're not pushing it yet into the pile. We're pushing it into like a parameter that we added to this whole pile family. Because these are nested, it won't push those values into the nested family. So when I hit accept changes, here's what happened. When I select this, we push the values into this right here, into the parent mark. We didn't push it yet into the mark value. And if I tab select each of the individual piles, you see over here we pushed it into the parent mark, but we haven't yet pushed it into the mark value. Basically, the next rule I'm going to run is going to take this value and this value right here, concatenate them together and push it into the mark value. And then it's also going to grab this value and push it into the entire pile. And watch this. I'm going to go ReNumber. Now I'm going to say set mark. We're targeting the mark value. I'm going to auto number by view. And now watch what happens when I hit accept changes. It renumbers the piles. So this number and these are matching. And then if I hit tab, what it does over here is it grabs this number here and concatenates it with this pile number and sets that for the mark value for basically the subcomponent of that family. And just like that, with 2 clicks of a button, essentially, I was able to get a standard numbering convention for my Pilecaps, and then I can get a sub-numbering system, shall we say, for the piles that are nested inside of there. So again, I know that was a quick demo of that, but our website actually has some information on that, and I'll point you to that in just a moment. Okay. All right, I just have a few tips, and then we'll stay online for a few minutes to answer questions. If for some reason, let's say you're doing your curtain panels and you're getting some odd numbering behavior, it may be because your view depth is too deep on your elevation. And so if you pull your far clip back so it just hits those curtain panels, it won't accidentally renumber the curtain panels like off to the side. So be aware of your view depth when doing that, because those other curtain panels technically do show up in your view, even though you can't see them because they're kind of beyond your view depth. But the actual view depth itself will pick up on that. So just be aware of that if you see the numbering getting a little awkward. We talked about this just with the piles. We made this is nested. This is kind of hard-coded into the program. We recognize nested elements. We also recognize things that you flip. So for example, you drop a family in and you hit the flip button, we recognize that if they're flipped or not. So we can actually tell ReNumber to ignore nested elements. So just be aware of that. Either you can make sure the nested family is not shared. So for those of you that are making families, you probably know what this not shared means, or just make sure you ignore the nested. This is probably easier to do than dealing with the shared thing. You saw this where I added a vertex. That gives you exact precision on what order you want to renumber things in. So again, be thinking of the vertices. And then you can also renumber views on sheets. So feel free to draw lines through your viewports, and you can renumber things in order. We handle all of the duplicate numbering because we kind of do it all in the background. So you can't end up with 2 number ones, but you don't have to renumber views temporarily so you can renumber the other ones. We handle all that for you. Okay, and so you can also rename your views on sheets. Even though it said renumber, you can also do some renaming. And then I just want to point out some things about doors. We're not going to get into this, but we have some more info on our website. A couple things about doors. You can, when you get an odd number like this, when you go to renumber doors, especially when you do the auto number by view, you can use a little flip over here and change the door value to read the 2-room value. So, or actually, I'm sorry, right now we're reading the 2-room value. If you want to flip it to read the from-room value, you can certainly do that. So by default, in a situation like this, you're not going to get any change to the door when you actually flip it. But what I do want to point out to you that you need to be very careful of is if your door uses the room calculation point, if you actually do a flip over here, it will actually physically flip your door. And so I want to kind of point that out, that if you do the flip button, it will actually flip the doors. So those are doors that are using the room calculation point or room location point. So be aware that by you need to read this before you hit this button over here. Okay. The other thing too, though, is you can actually also, let me just kind of point this out. If you just want to report from room value, rather than flipping the door that uses a room location point, you could put a checkbox in here and it won't flip the door. It'll just report the from room value. And so that way you can change the door numbering without flipping a door that uses a room location point. But there's something you also need to be aware of, that it's temporary, meaning if you exit renumber and come back to renumber, it won't remember that value. So just be aware of that. One thing I do want to point out to you is we do have a blog post on how to actually put a checkbox in here and have her remember that for next time you launch renumber. So I won't get into that today because we're out of time, but if you want it to remember your choice over here so it always reports from room value, we can do that, and our blog post online has that information. Last thing I just want to show you, go to our website, check out our blog posts. We have one here on that renumbering pile foundations. We have a great one here. We also have a video that corresponds to this. And we also have some great solutions over here for you to check out. So if you want to get some more renumbering tips and tricks, definitely check out the website. Again, our blog has a lot of information, and also our support for IdeateApps. We have our pre-recorded classes, so this will be on that list. But when you come in over here, we have lots of help files and how-tos on IdeateApps. So we have some great stuff over here, including some renumbering tricks for you as well. So I just wanted to point that out. Appreciate your time. When you exit this, you'll see a short survey. Please take a moment to fill it out. I do apologize for going over, but I always want to show you lots of great things. Learn more at our website at www.ideatesoftware.com. Richard, we're going to stay online here for a few minutes to answer questions. Do you have any other questions that may have come up?
No, there are no further questions at this time.
Okay. Yeah, no worries. So we'll stay online here for a few more minutes to answer any questions that you have. So feel free to type in the chat panel. Appreciate you taking time with us today. Hope you learned some new things, or at least you're aware of some of the things that you can do. Check out the website. We got some great tips and tricks. Thank you all, and we'll hang out for a few minutes, and we'll see you next time. Thank you very much.